Celia Hatch describes herself as a UFO nut living in Calgary, Canada. Over a lifetime of activism in many different areas, she has landed in the world of extraterrestrials, and she believes that one of the best ways to help leave a better world for our children is to communicate with evolved life forms who can help us learn how to better get along with each other. And she joins us now. Hi, Celia.
Hey, Dean, how are you?
I'm good. I've interviewed Mike Moberg a couple of times, and one of my favourite sayings came from Mike, and he says that why chase ET when you can invite him in or her for tea? And I just thought that was great, and that's basically what you do with the CE-5 movement. So how did you get involved?
So a long time ago, about almost 8 years ago, actually, I watched the documentary Sirius, which Dr. Greer created. It's got that plot line following this little mummified Atacama being. And in the movie, somewhere in there, he briefly talks about CE-5 and actually making a human-initiated request for contact. And I was just thrilled with that idea. I thought that was so exciting. And a friend of mine and I just got together and started a little group, and we've been meeting fairly regularly. Maybe the first 3 years was kind of sporadically here and there, but still fairly regularly over 3 years. We didn't drop it too much, and then the last 3 or 4 years a lot more regularly. But yeah, it's been exciting. It's been a wonderful journey.
So describe what human-initiated contact means.
Yeah, so human-initiated contact is basically a request for communication from a human. And usually we go out under the stars, usually under CE-5, like typical CE-5 protocol. The name CE-5 is an acronym for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is part of the J. Allen Hynek classification. And it does literally is defined as human-initiated contact with ETs. And oh, I'm losing my train of thought here. So what was your question?
Well, human-initiated contact, so you're basically initiating contact with the ETs.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I mean, Sirius wasn't out that long ago, so the CE-5 movement itself isn't like an old movement. It's only a recent thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been around since the 90s. Yeah, that's where I was going. Sorry, I was trying to explain that CE-5 has become a ubiquitous term, and that although it started with Dr. Greer, it's really gone all over the world and describes a whole bunch of different methodologies for contact. And so even though the protocols that Dr. Greer started involved lights and sounds and coherent thought sequencing, people have really taken ET contact, and it's kind of developed into all kinds of different ways that people make contact. Doesn't necessarily even have to be at night, and it has also sprouted up all over the world, not just originating from the work that Dr. Greer did, but like what Robert Bingham does, or I've met lots of people that have developed it and explored it all on their own, and they never heard of Dr. Greer or anything like that. So CE-5 really has become something that is all-encompassing and is defined by human-initiated contact.
Right, right. So is it easy to go out and see a UFO?
I would say maybe simple, not easy. So it really there's so many different factors determining whether or not you'll have a multiple witness UFO sighting. Generally, if you're ready, they're ready, and you will see, you'll have a sighting. But there's a whole bunch of other things too. I do think the probabilities are increased if you go out into the wilderness where it's nice and remote. Definitely there is huge factors in relation to your own frequency and where you're at in your own involvement. So the most key ingredient, I would say, would be your ability to raise your consciousness, to expand it into the field, the consciousness field of humanity and all that is, and bringing your frequency up to a plane where we can meet and communicate with highly evolved beings. So they bring their frequency down to meet with us, and we bring our frequency up. So if you're able to increase your frequency,
Yep.
then your probability is much higher for making contact.
And you mentioned that as one of the ingredients, and you wrote a book called simply called a CE-5 handbook, and you mentioned there are 3 ingredients that you need, and one is connection to one mind consciousness, and then there's 2 others: a sincere heart and a clear intent. So when you make contact with ET, I mean, can they detect whether you have a clear heart and what your intent is?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how they do that. I was thinking about that the other day. What are the measurements that they make, and how is it that they see us? You hear about different ways that ETs or the different beings, or maybe in different realms, that different beings view us. I heard that beings from non-physical realms actually see us as light and like masses of light. And so maybe we emit a certain sound or light frequency or color or something that they can see um, our progress on the scale moving kind
Mm-hmm.
of like from service to self to service to others.
Right. Have you received, like, I mean, is it threatening making contact with these entities?
I think it can be threatening if you yourself are afraid of it. Um, and then you kind of get into your own sort of like complex about, what are you doing and are you interacting with benevolent beings, and it kind of like screws yourself up in your own little world. But as far as has anybody been negatively affected by human initiated contact, I have not heard of any. um, I know that there are a lot of accounts about ETs and abductions, which was kind of a thing in the past that happened um, before. Doesn't seem to be happening, at least not in the numbers that it used to. And I think that it's still wise to be cautious about, you know, yourself and what you're getting into always, for all things. But as far as um, have has in CE-5 community, have we ever heard about an ET that was ever harming anybody, or had some kind of malevolent intent, or like just screwing with anybody?
Mm-hmm.
No, never. And the CE-5 community is quite large, so and quite connected. People really do talk to each other. So although we've had a lot of, you know, gossip about other CE-5 members or other humans,
Mm-hmm.
never anything of an extraterrestrial origin that has affected anybody negatively.
So to get started, can someone go out and just do this on their own, or is it better to come through a group like yours?
Do you know, I think that either works just fine. I think that when you're working on your own, sometimes your desire is amplified to do this, and especially if you are willing to take the steps to go out there at night and to try this, then you do have a kind of like a determination that I think is recognized or measured in some way. But if you are in a group, then you do have the group dynamics of amplification, which happens when you bring people together. So I think that they've done studies with this. I don't remember the name of the study, but there's a Princeton study about, like, oh, if you've got one person,
Mm-hmm.
how can you affect that little predicting machine number
Yep.
thing, right? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as you bring people together, you become more powerful. And so for me personally, I do find that if I'm in a group, it is almost like a 90% chance that we will have a sighting or have some kind of experience. And if I'm by myself, it's like a 10% chance that I'll have a sighting or an experience.
Right.
So I find for personally that the group experience really does amplify my ability to make contact.
Well, I guess it's the old, it's the old theory in the, or not theory, but in the Bible. It says when more than 2 people pray together, the amplification and the power that brings is it's unmeasurable. So I guess in that respect, it's similar. It's like the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what kind of tools or equipment would someone need to do this?
So zero tools or equipment are needed. I think that there's a whole bunch of different ways that people think that we should all make contact. It's interesting once you get online and into the forums and stuff. Some people are very against tools, and some people really love them. And I really think it's just up to each unique individual. You're going to find what excites you and what works the best for you. I think that some people are attracted to tools because if you use something like a magnetometer, tri-field meter, for example, then because there really is literally nothing that could affect that if you're out in nature and your cell phones are off, I think for some people that's a level of proof for themselves that really resonates with them, and that it just works for them and they use it because it works for them. But you really don't need it. So you could definitely just go out somewhere where there's a nice dark night sky and just with your intention and with your heart, make a request for contact and not need any tools whatsoever.
Now, I've done quite a number of reports on CE-5 just this year alone, and one question I get a lot from people is why don't they film the event? And Mike Merberg suggested to me, no, he says that's not the reason, that's not why we do it. And I guess people are just curious that they just want to see an alien on film. But I mean, you guys don't film your events.
No, we did try. I do have a little night vision camera that I bought, and honestly, it's so much of a bother. It takes away from the experience. You just cannot. Getting UFO footage is really difficult, and then even when you do have something that looks anomalous to a group of people on the ground, and you can see in the great big sky what it is doing, when you're zoomed up on it, it just looks like a little like white light. It
Right.
looks kind of boring, honestly,
Yeah.
on film.
Yeah.
So it's just too much of a bother for us, and so we haven't. I've never. I think Mike is right. It really isn't the intention. I think that there are people. It's interesting. There are people out there, and they may not necessarily categorize themselves as a human-initiated contact. They may just categorize themselves as like UFO researchers or whatever. But that they do continually get sightings and they continually get footage. And it's really interesting to me. That's almost as if different people have different roles, and that I don't know if the ETs are saying, okay, yes, we will show us to you every time you come out with a camera. We're okay with you recording us. But you could have a CE-5 group that's like, oh, let's start recording now. And then, it's just like crickets out there once they go out with the equipment. So it is interesting that there's different roles that seem to be being played.
Is it easy to discern what's real and what's not real when you're out there?
I would say no, especially at first, because you're so excited that you want everything to be real. And then you'll see a plane and everybody will get really excited about seeing a plane, and they're like, oh, wait a second, no, it's got like the red and the green lights and it's got a strobe light. Like, no. Making that discernment, I think, is a real process in CE-5. And I think that's something that it's something that it's like, if you can be brave enough to jump into not being an expert, not knowing, and also having a whole bunch of sightings that you'll never know if they were UFOs or not legitimately, right? Like there's alleged meteorites, which is just a falling star. And I think that's a low-key sighting. I think sometimes that's ET. I think sometimes it's not. I think that it could be a falling star, and sometimes it's a response maybe to, like, one of my favorite alleged meteorite examples is that I was down with Costa Macris in Mount Shasta, and we were having a CE-5 there, and it was the end of the night, and we had a beautiful night. And he said, thank you, and an alleged meteorite came by, right? So was that a falling star? Yeah, it could have been like very synchronous and just aligned with him saying thank you. I would probably say that, personally, I would believe that that was a recognition of our appreciation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What about actual beings themselves? Do you actually see those, or just the UFOs?
So at first, if you're getting into CE-5, I would probably guess that most people are not ready for face-to-face contact. And I don't think that we have had, there's been two members of our group that have had face-to-face contact. One was in his home, and a being kind of like materialized in his home.
Wow.
He was about to hit the light switch, and
Yep.
he looks back in the room, and there's a being there, and just kind of appeared and then went away. And it really is about readiness, right? Like he's totally ready, totally like just out of our group, just thinking about all of us, our levels of fear, and also our levels of like, well, like what do we believe reality is, and how kind of stuck we are to like this 3D reality and attached to it, or can we view reality as a little bit more fluid or elastic? He's totally ready. And then we have another guy in our group that had a full-on experiencer, like went on the ship for 3 weeks,
Wow.
like wild story, and he has seen many face-to-face beings recently in this last year. So and his readiness is absolutely complete and done because he has absolutely no fear. It's interesting because I was speaking with another CE-5 leader a little while ago, and he was saying, if you say to yourself that you have no fear, you are absolutely lying to yourself. All humans have fear.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know about, there's this one guy in my group that I'm pretty sure he is absolutely fearless. And I'm sure that is why the ETs have shown themselves to him first, because it's such a disconnect and such a strange and surreal experience. And I think it not only is it weird and different, but I think it can really send our fight or flight system into like hyperdrive. So
Wow.
not having fear and having that face-to-face contact is, I think, totally related.
Yeah, we need to talk to that gentleman that spent 3 weeks on the craft. I mean, he would have some story to tell. It's funny you mentioned that one person went to hit the light switch and a being suddenly appeared, because I mean, and that's not unusual. I hear a lot of people say that they're sitting in their lounge room and they suddenly kind of notice something kind of flip past, and they look and there's nothing there, and they think, oh well, maybe just my imagination. But I'm starting to think there's an explanation for that.
It may be, right? I mean, and it's interesting because I think that our imagination is almost like the doorway to these different realities, and that if we utilize our imagination, and if we even kind of almost entertain ourselves a little bit with our imagination, I think that actually increases the real reality to come forward more. So if you do say something like, oh, okay, a little light flash, and it could have been a reflection from something in the room or a mirror or your phone or something, but if you're like, oh, maybe that could have been, something special or something different, I think that the chances of you catching something that really is real and anomalous grows higher, not just from the habit of you looking for it, but
Mm-hmm.
even almost like literally to open the door to that reality.
Right. It was funny. It was a few nights ago from the date we're recording this interview, and my wife was on the phone with her daughter, and she just came out, and I was watching TV, and she just asked me, do you often see, sitting there and think you see something that might be across to your right or to your left, and there's nothing there? And I said, yeah. I mean, I think that happens a lot. I mean, it's happened to me. And she says, you're not bringing these things into our home, are you? And so guilty.
Sorry, that was you.
Yeah. Cynthia, Cielia, I should say, meditation. How important is meditation in this process?
I would say that it can be very valuable, and I know that some people don't meditate very well, or they say that they don't meditate very well, which in reality maybe they don't realize that nobody really meditates that great, and somebody that has meditated for many years still has issues with, like thoughts coming in and that kind of thing. But in our experience, we've had people that are really like experienced meditators in our group, and I think that has helped quite a bit. And we've also had a few people that are just not that great at meditating, but it's not a requirement. I think it's just a help.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier vibration levels and lifting your vibration levels, and of course that's a common practice with people who follow the law of attraction topic and meditating and raising your vibration. So, why is that so important?
It really is important because I think that it's a function of bridging the reality. It's like I don't think that and this is just from my own understanding, it's interesting because you draw a whole bunch of opinions and beliefs for yourself from a whole bunch of different sources and also from your own experience. But I don't think that it's very easy for entities, beings from a higher realm or area or dimension to enter into this 3D reality. And so it's almost as if we're in such a thick fog or dense world that they could come knocking all they want and even bring themselves all the way down to our reality, but because they are in a separate reality, it's we can't even hear them or see them. I know that there are, and I always just use the word ET because that's just simple and short and easy for me, but I mean, what are we communicating in with? Interdimensionals, multidimensionals? Probably some of them are physical. Maybe some of them really literally could literally knock on our 3D doors and we could answer the door and see them. Yeah, it's really hard to say, but I think part of the reason is that kind of like operational, yeah, you actually literally have to get to this like contact highway where
Right.
you bring yourself there too. But I think also there's something about CE-5 being just a high frequency thing. It's like if you go to the store and you buy a Ouija board. That is just typically going to be a bad experience
Mm-hmm.
because it's just so often associated with kind of darkness or, you know, not so happy spirits or whatever that is, right? So you probably could go to the store and buy a Ouija board and do great things with it with, you know, a pure intention. But I think in that way, CE-5 is it's associated with harmony and peace and
Right.
a bringing of an entire planet to unity consciousness. And so I think it's like simply characterized as a high frequency modality of contact with other realms and that sort of thing. And I think that's also why, just backtracking to that question about like, is there anything threatening about CE-5?
Yep.
I think there's something kind of sacred about it. I think that it's possible that maybe there are negative entities that may want to mess with it or whatever, but I think it's kind of protected, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah. How long would someone have to go out? How many times will they need to go out before they actually see something?
So in my book, I actually said 6, and I don't know exactly where I came up with that number, but it does feel like that's probably accurate for people. I have people that join our group and have sightings on the first night. I really feel like you usually like 3 or 4 nights in, probably, as long as you're following, you know, the protocols in terms of raising your frequency and opening, expanding your consciousness to include the reality that really we are all one, and we're and allowing that communication to happen in that way. But I've had a few people. In the book, I actually said, if you haven't had a sighting in 6 sightings, then email me and we'll try and figure out what's going on for you.
Right.
And I have had a couple people email me. So, but I think they're outliers. I haven't had a ton of emails. It feels like if you're determined enough to keep going out, within 3 or 4 or 5 outings, I think someone would see something. Especially because now it's so different than, say, when we first started out, we didn't see anything for 3 years. That's like
Right.
a
Wow.
long time, right? Yeah. I went down to Mount Shasta to see Costa McCrease, and asked him, like, what do you think we should do? Why aren't we seeing anything? We haven't seen anything for 3 years. He's like, wow, you guys are dedicated. I don't know if I would have stayed with it that long. But he suggested potlucks. And so for us, our missing ingredient was group coherence, which can be very important.
Mm-hmm.
Like many different people came to our group, lots of different personalities, viewpoints, and all kinds of things like that. And they were all kind of connecting through me and speaking to me, but they would never really speak to each other in the group. And
Right.
so that was what we were missing. And so that's why in the book I kind of invited people, if they want, to just email me and ask why, because there might be something that they're missing and they're just not sure exactly what it is, whether or not it's their own personal well-being, because if you're not feeling in a good space, then probably contact is not going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
or whether it's something to do with the group dynamic or even like where you're going or that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, before I ask you about some of your more interesting experiences, firstly, how does someone get started, and can you recommend a resource or two that people can check out?
Yeah. So to get started, really you just have to, it's as simple as going outside, and you can do C5 inside too. Although I think just being in nature is a little bit more magical, but that's just personal. I do really like
Mm-hmm.
to go outside and just have a strong intention and a pure heart and reach out to make communication. Um, it's really that simple. People do like to usually get a little bit more information to go outside, to prepare themselves to go outside. The book that we wrote is free, and you can get it at a ce5handbook.com. And there's all kinds of, you know, questions and answers in there. You can also go to the ET Contact Hub, www.etcontacthub.com, where you've got shared resources from all over the world, from all different modalities of contact, and different people, different climates, different everything, and instructions there on how to make contact there too. So if you were just starting out, I would say, like, just have the bravery to do something different and just get out there and do something exciting. And if you need a resource, you could go try one of those resources.